This is 5 Live Formula One with Jenny Gow.
Hello and welcome to the Circuit of the Americas. It is the United States Grand Prix. We are live for the entire weekend and we cannot wait to see what will happen at one of the most anticipated races of the year. The crowds have flocked in and even Brad Pitt has just walked past me on his way into a garage to go and have a nose around as well. This is the race where all of the celebrities turn up and want to get involved in the action. We're expecting over 400,000 people across the weekend. It's going to be busy. And as ever, we have Jack Nicholls, our lead commentator, and Jolyon Palmer ready for free practice one. And Jack, there's plenty to talk about, but let's start with on track because a few different faces and names to add to the mix today for free practice one.
Yeah, we've got some FP1 drivers, some we've seen before, like Antonio Giovinazzi, who's driving for Haas, but we've got Théo Pourchaire out for Alfa Romeo, Logan Sargent's doing FP1 for Williams, Robert Schwartzman is in at Ferrari, and Alex Palou is in at McLaren. So those are the, however many I just read out, five FP1 drivers that will see in action, and some of them are quite exciting. In fact, most of them are quite exciting. Giovinazzi, we know what Giovinazzi's all about.
Poor Antonio.
No, but we know. Look, I like Antonio, lovely man. We've seen him drive in Formula One enough to not be like, oh, how's Giovinazzi going to get on against Mick Schumacher? You know, that's not going to be the highlight of my morning or afternoon. But some of the others might be.
Jolyon Palmer. The championship, when it comes to the drivers, that's done. That's gone to Max Verstappen. Constructors is still in the mix, and Red Bull could do it this weekend. But Max will just go out there and want to win anyway, won't he?
Yep, that's what he...
It's a winning machine.
Exactly. That's all he knows, is to try and fight for wins. The championship's done, but he's just relentless at the moment. He's been on such good form. The championship was in the bag anyway, and to say the constructors are still in the mix is maybe a little bit tenuous. Red Bull will probably wrap it up this weekend unless they're outscored quite convincingly by Ferrari, which hasn't happened for pretty much all the season. So yeah, that's a formality as well, but they're still just racing for wins. Second in the Drivers' Championship is something that all those guys fighting for it will probably want to have, even if they're not going to be crowned champion. You want to be the runner-up in the end. So there's still a bit at stake and a big crowd to see what I think will be a good race. It's nice to be back in Austin. It's a good racetrack.
Yeah, it feels good to be back here, certainly. The huge flag of the United States rippling in the breeze. And actually, Jack, when we were coming into the track this morning, it was kind of gusty out there, which is going to cause the drivers some interesting times.
Yeah, the highest point of the circuit actually is those sort of, well, it's turn one, but then you go into those fast sweepers. And I remember a few years ago, is it the left-hander of turn 9, the one right at the end of those sort of S's that people were kind of having quite a bit of trouble there when they were getting a bit of a crosswind as they came over that crest. So yeah, could see that. But as you say, it's a really great race. The fan attendance last year was absolutely huge, and everybody's just living their best Austin life. They
are. However, there is plenty of politics going on because I suppose the cost cap is what everybody's talking about this weekend, and it's not the sexiest of subjects, funnily enough, but the FIA still haven't really clarified exactly what's going on at Red Bull. And Jack, it's just causing everybody to fill in the blanks, isn't it, themselves? And are they going to get a penalty? If so, what will it be? And we seem to be stuck in a vortex of nothingness.
Yeah, well, it's just waiting for the decision, really, isn't it? I think that's basically what it comes down to. The FIA have said that Red Bull breached the cost cap in a minor way, and now we're waiting for the penalty to be announced, fundamentally. So yeah, everyone's having a little guess. Everybody's hearing whispers, or maybe it's this, maybe it's that. But until we know, then we don't know.
You're absolutely right. And Andrew Benson, the FIA have published their findings after Suzuka. There were a couple of little things that they were looking into, one being the recovery vehicle being out on track. They were also looking at a few other items, points, flags, weather. Can you give us a very brief summary of the findings, please?
Well, they basically, Jenny, admitted that they made a mistake in putting the recovery vehicle out on track when they did. They said that in hindsight that shouldn't have happened. That was after, people will remember, all the drivers were unanimous in condemning that decision. And there's a couple of other things going on. It reminded the drivers of their responsibility to not go too quickly after Pierre Gasly did, in the FIA's estimation. They've said they're going to review the point system after the confusion at the end of the Japanese Grand Prix, when everybody thought the point system said something that it didn't actually say and wasn't intended to say. And that's it in a nutshell. Those are the important things. One final point is about Pirelli's tyres, wet tyres particularly. They are being looked at after, 12 years now, Jolyon, of people not being happy with the extreme wet Pirelli tyre. They still aren't happy, and the FIA and Pirelli are talking about that.
Cars heading out on track. One final point is that Niels Wittich will be the race director for the remaining races this season. They will not rotate anymore. And as I say that, Jack, we've got cars out and about.
Certainly have. Beautiful day in Austin, 29 degrees. The air temperature, track temperature up at 38.5, and Stroll, Gasly, Vettel, Tsunoda, Giovinazzi, Norris, Ocon, Sainz, Schwartzman and Hamilton all straight out onto the circuit, and already a decent amount of crowd in the grandstand. What time is it? It's 2 o'clock, just gone 2 o'clock here, so good commitment from Brad Pitt to be turning up for FP1.
Yeah, I thought that's what we should have started with.
Yeah.
Pitts in the pits for FP1.
Oh.
I think we should be clear about why he's here. There was a big meeting this morning between Brad Pitt and a Hollywood director who's putting together a film on Formula One. It was with the team principals. They were basically briefing F1 and the team principals where their plans are for that movie. And Lewis Hamilton's also been involved with that movie. He's been mentioning a couple of times in the last few weeks that he's been over to Hollywood 2 or 3 times recently to meet with Brad Pitt and the director to talk about that movie and make sure it's as authentic as it can be, because I think, as Lewis will be the first to admit, not many racing films are that convincing for people who know about racing.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see what comes of that, actually. It's very difficult to make a racing film real racing, isn't it? I think for me Grand Prix was the only one that's really, and that was because they literally filmed real race cars racing and crashing. Here's Pierre Gasly's radio.
Don't know why it smells like barbecue in the car.
Gaz is saying it smells like barbecue in the car. I mean,
probably because people are having barbecues, I would imagine.
Yeah, exactly. A nice bit of brisket driving around.
So Brad Pitt's not just here to chew your ear off about long run times on a Friday.
I have not been discussing long run with Brad Pitt, no, sorry. I know it's disappointing for you. We can do it ourselves, Joey, although people need to be aware that long run kind of won't exist in second practice later on today, because the entire session is being devoted to a Pirelli tyre test.
Every time I'm here, there's no long run corner these days. What's happened?
Well, if you do 2 races a year, then chances are it's not going to happen. Hashtag BBC F1, of course, if you want to get in touch. Just on there, while the cars are on outlaps and stuff, we'll cover off that FIA report thing, because overall I thought it just seemed remarkably fair and accurate. Basically, it was, we made a mistake sending him out in the wet. Gazzo was driving a bit quick, but in his defense, the lap time delta's a bit messed up because he drove so slowly with no front wing. His safety car delta was a bit out of whack and was actually, far too high, so that made him go too quickly. So that was all a bit of so there were just lots of contributing factors, and they shouldn't have sent the truck out, the recovery vehicles out when they did, and there we go, a bit of a mistake from FIA. Maybe Gasly was driving too quickly, and that kind of seems accurate.
Yeah, that was the logic that everyone, I think, could see basically after when the dust had settled on it. You could see why it happened, but it was a mistake that everyone could see and the drivers were very unhappy with. And so the conclusion is the obvious one, really. You don't want to see, in soaking wet conditions with poor visibility and limited grip, a recovery vehicle literally on the circuit. It's an obvious thing. I mean, drivers were rightly annoyed about it.
Yeah, and one of the interesting things that was said yesterday was by Fernando Alonso, who said that he never saw the recovery vehicle. Not because he didn't go past it, but because he literally couldn't see it, which underlines the danger.
This is the really scary thing. The really scary thing. And people were highlighting Gasly because he was going the quickest, but he was on the full wet tyre with visibility. There were other drivers that had no visibility on an intermediate tyre that was prone to aquaplaning. it was a really sketchy time.
And here's the thing: do you think drivers even knew that there'd been a crash there? Because when Sainz went off in the back, some of those further back might have not known Sainz had even shunted there, because of the visibility.
Yeah, many wouldn't. Yeah. Many wouldn't. Hamilton was so close to hitting him. Gasly picked up the advertising board, didn't he? Wouldn't have seen that coming at all. Visibility in those conditions is so bad.
Jenny?
Yeah, just on the whole race director and having one permanent race director now for the last 4 races, I feel like that's what the drivers have been wanting for a very long time, and they've got their wish now. But do we think that this is now a permanent thing with just one race director for all 24 races next season?
We don't know that yet, Jenny, but it does appear to be heading in that direction. As you say correctly, the drivers have been saying for a while that the alternation of race directors wasn't really working. I mean, this report has come out quickly, and that's effective of the FIA to get that dealt with. But we should remember the backdrop. This is a year in which there has been many instances of situations where the drivers and the teams and even Formula One themselves have not been happy with the way the FIA are running the sport. And actually that continues into the budget cap situation that you briefly mentioned earlier. People are a little bit flummoxed as to why the penalty hasn't been announced. There is a process, and that process has moved on a step this weekend with the FIA saying to Red Bull, this is what our offer is. We say it's called an accepted breach agreement. Basically, it would involve Red Bull admitting guilt in return for a penalty that FIA has proposed. We don't know what that penalty is yet, as you said earlier. But it is taking an inordinately long time, and obviously even getting to the point where they decided that a team was in breach of the financial regulations took a very long time. And that topic of the budget cap has very much dominated the conversations this weekend. Many of the teams, most of the teams, if not all of the teams that aren't Red Bull and AlphaTauri, very unhappy with Red Bull. Red Bull pushing back, and then someone's crashed.
Yeah,
crashed.
I think it's Giovinazzi just trying to get out of the barriers in the Haas. Yellow flag is out there, and it is Antonio Giovinazzi who has put it in the barriers. He's trying to drive out of the Tech Pro as we speak, but he looks like he's pretty well stuck in there. A red flag is out. He's trying to pull away, but that is not ideal for Antonio Giovinazzi. It's at turn 13 that he's gone off, and he's almost managed to pull it out of the wall, but he has not. And in a not a great look that for Giovinazzi.
Well, I thought you were a bit harsh on the top of the show, saying it wasn't that interesting to you, Giovinazzi, in practice, because he's actually fighting for a seat for next year, and he's up against Mick Schumacher.
Not anymore, he's not.
Exactly. This is so costly.
I stuck. I don't know why.
Yeah, copy that.
So he's managed to get out of the wall now, has Giovinazzi, and make his way back around. But yeah, in a season where the main criticism of Schumacher has been the it's not at turn 12, is it? No, it's much earlier on in the S's. So that's where he's gone off in the S's. We're about to see what happened, but in a season where the main criticism of Schumacher has been the amount of damage and crashes that he's had, it's tricky that Giovinazzi, the rear end just drifting away from him as he came. I don't think I've ever seen anyone go in the wall there.
No, through turn 5 and 6, the left into the right, and the rear just snaps away out of nowhere. Really, it's not on the edge; it just suddenly goes over the edge, and that was Giovinazzi's second flying lap that he was just starting. He's done one flying lap. There's 1.3 seconds down on Schumacher. Then he was starting a second one, trying to find his feet, and in a car that he's not completely comfortable with, and he's basically just gone over the limit. He's been under the limit on his first lap, and then he's just gone over it. Tiny bit of dirty air, maybe from a car ahead, but that's really just not good for Giovinazzi, who is in this fight for the Haas seat next year, alongside Schumacher, who is very much tipped to leave the team, and Nico Hülkenberg as a steady pair of hands.
I think the right rear may have some damage.
Yeah, it probably will have a little bit. We'll see how much damage he has.
He hit the barrier hard as well. The Tech Pro is quite forgiving as barriers go, and he's hit it with the right front, which seems to be still pointing in the right direction, and he's bringing the car back to the pits. But it was a fair whack. He's actually really lucky to drive that back to the pits. Front wing is damaged, but that's an easy fix. But it's just not a good starting point, is it, for a team that they want to get the experienced driver in, potentially because Mick, whilst he's had some pace, has been a little bit accident prone, and then your potential replacement crashes on lap 2 in the car.
And Schumacher hasn't really had an accident in a while, has he? He has seemed to kind of mainly clear that up.
He had a big one in Japan after the checker flag in FP1.
Oh, yeah.
It wasn't in the race, but it was a really unnecessary crash for Schumacher. Apart from that, he hasn't, but he's just tarnished slightly by his 2 big whacks earlier on in Saudi and Monaco. But his performance has been okay, and Magnussen's been saying the same. You know, Mick's tough to beat, so Schumacher, he'll be in the garage right now, seeing Giovinazzi being wheeled back in and thinking, okay, this is great for me.
Jenny.
Yeah, I was speaking to him yesterday, actually, and he was, for the first time, I felt relatively defensive about his position at Haas and what he has to try and do and achieve. And I did feel a little bit sorry for him. And I think that crash in Japan was such a howler, such a mistake to make. And I think he's also got some very vocal bosses who are, it just feels like there's a huge amount of pressure on him. And will he keep his seat? Should he keep his seat? I can't see the people around that are being touted like Hulkenberg. You know, I just don't get it. So for me, I find it curious, and the fact that they're saying, oh, Mick Schumacher's just too expensive for our team. Well, now Giovinazzi's too expensive for the team as well. That team are getting bad. Just as well they've got a new sponsor. They're going to need it.
For me, I think Hulkenberg next season would be picking you up more points than Schumacher, is my sort of personal belief. But I also don't think that... I think Schumacher's done enough for me to warrant another year, because Hulkenberg is not your sort of long-term future, and okay, maybe Schumacher's not the long-term future at Haas, but as much as I rate Hulkenberg, I think he's 36 now, potentially, so, and obviously you've got Alonso and Hamilton still cracking on and doing great in their late 30s, early 40s, but to me, Hulkenberg is it's a bit of a nothing. I would happily see Haas stick with Schumacher, I think, because I don't think there's that much in the olden days, and I think I said this a couple of weeks ago, if there was some Piastri on the sidelines still, or a Norris on the sidelines, or a Russell on the sidelines, and Schumacher's keeping a seat, you'd be a bit frustrated. But actually, in the situation it is now, I would give Schumacher another year.
I agree with you on, I think Hulkenberg is probably the better driver. I would have question marks on, is he going to come back and be really motivated at this stage in his career? For someone that's driven in a lot of good midfield teams, Haas will be, I think, the least well-funded team that he'll have driven for in Formula One. Okay, they've got a new title sponsor for next year, and maybe that'll help and be a bit more enticing. But he'll be coming back as a sort of stopgap, won't he, for a year or two, maybe to bank some points if he's really hungry for it. But he hasn't raced, apart from some super sub appearances, for a couple of seasons. If he's motivated for it and really wants to work hard with the team and knuckle down, I think he'll probably score more points than Mick in the next season or two. It'll be my 2 former teammates going together at Haas, yeah. Magnussen and Hulkenberg.
I think if we look at the Constructors' Championship standings, that gives you an explanation as to why they look like they're heading in this direction of going for Hulkenberg rather than Schumacher. Haas are tied for 8th place with AlphaTauri on 34 points, and they're 11 points behind Aston Martin, who are only 7 points behind Alfa Romeo in 6th. Let's say there's $10 million between each one of those positions in the Constructors' Championship. You know, if you had Hulkenberg in the team, would you be scoring 11 more points, or even potentially, a bit more than that? Obviously, it's difficult for Haas to score points anyway. Every single point they can score is important for them. Money is tight for them, even with a new sponsor, which they announced yesterday. They need every dollar they can get, and so I think that's the key motivating factor behind the decision, is just trying to get as high up the championship as they possibly can.
But obviously it's the right decision. That's the right motivation.
Yeah, it's great to have a team that's just, especially a team like Haas, that in the last couple of years took well-financed driver / maybe 2 and plummeted to being plumb last year in quite embarrassing fashion. it's nice to see teams just thinking performance, put in the best drivers you can possibly have, rather than just think the commercial benefits. And so it's great. The thing for Mick, though, when you look at just the standings, it doesn't look great for him. He's behind Magnussen. But actually, you've got to remember that Magnussen scored big points in Bahrain, which was a huge haul. 5th place, 10 points straight in the bank. If you take that out as one great drive from Magnussen,
well, then you have to take out Schumacher's 6th, surely.
Well, I think because it's the first race as well. If you, let's say, then you have 17 more races. Schumacher first one in a competitive car as well. Okay, Magnussen was back, but basically in the last 17 races there's been very little to choose between them.
Yeah.
Just the first one that Magnussen banked the best result of their season, and it really does skew the picture, I think, overall of what's actually been pretty close, the fight between those two drivers.
Apologies for no sync. 44 minutes and 13, 12, 11, 10 seconds left on the clock. Max Verstappen has just done the fastest first sector of anyone. Lap times wise, Esteban Ocon is quickest on a 1 minute 38.8, 7 tenths quicker than Fernando Alonso. They're both on the medium tyres. Schumacher third quickest on the softs in the Haas, a second away from Ocon at the moment. Stroll is 4th, Perez 5th, Norris is 6th. Not a huge amount, really, of representative running. We'll just watch Verstappen come through the final couple of corners. The long, sweeping right-hander that takes him into the quick left of turn 19, and then the 20th corner on the circuit, the 90-degree left, out across the line, and Verstappen does a 1 minute 38.2, which on the soft tyre is half a second quicker than Esteban Ocon has managed. Jenny.
Yeah, and just down at McLaren, actually, and we know we've got these 5 drivers who are in this session. Okay, Giovinazzi, scrub him name off the list, I suppose, for Haas, but I'm really quite excited by some of the other drivers that are taken to this session, and especially down at McLaren, where Daniel Ricciardo sits out this session. And Alex Palou is in, IndyCar champion from 2021, and an exciting talent. I mean, he's done tests with the team, but this is his first chance to go out there in a current Formula One car and see what he can do. And Logan Sargent, who could well find himself in at Williams next year for Latifi. He's in Latifi's car today, young American, and, you know, gets a tryout in front of these adoring fans who will be delighted if we get an American driver in the championship. So a big weekend, I think, for kind of American drivers and American series drivers.
Yeah, and I should have actually pointed out that with Robert Schwartzman in at Ferrari, it is Charles Leclerc who is missing this session. So that's a bit of an interesting one, that it is Leclerc who's missing out as opposed to Sainz. Here's Logan Sargent's radio.
I'm already losing rear grip.
Copy that.
So he is out on the hard tyres after 5 laps, and he's losing rear grip. Jenny?
Worth also mentioning that Charles Leclerc, we're expecting him to pick up a grid penalty this weekend for maybe new power unit. Ferrari, I think they might have got a fix. So that, you know, that just might add to the mix of why he's the one sitting out. He'd have had to sit out one session anyway, because that's the rules. As Alex Palou just gets ready to head back out on track. That's the noise in the background, and Brad Pitt watches on at the back of the garage to see Alex take to the track again.
I tell you what, if you want a storyline for Brad Pitt's new thing, then Alex Palou's contract saga would be quite a fun one. Won the championship with Chip Ganassi Racing last season, and then didn't particularly ingratiate himself with the team when he kind of signed for McLaren, despite already having a contract with Ganassi, and that all sort of kicked off. And after a strong start to the season with 3 podiums in the first 4 races, kind of dropped away a little bit before really dominating the final race of the season at Laguna Seca. Alex Palou absolutely just disappeared up the road from everybody else. So he's gone for the sort of McLaren, you know, I think the kind of whole aim was for Palou was Formula One. That seemed to be his target. That's why he wanted to get involved in the McLaren project and leave Chip Ganassi. But I think he is staying at Ganassi next year. I think that's how it all ended up forming in the end. So yeah, very interesting stuff from Palou. He did do some European racing, finished 7th in Formula 3 or the FIA Formula 3 European Championship in 2018, did a couple of seasons of GP3, finished 10th, won the Yas Marina sprint race back in 2015 with Campos Racing. So not exactly a stellar junior career for Alex Palou, but he certainly turned up and did the job in IndyCar last season, and again at times this season too. So interesting.
It's a strange one, really, because he was a Spanish driver, came up through the ranks in Europe, and look, it was always a solid driver, but never looked like he was potentially Formula One material. Went away to America, and they rate him really highly. And
did a bit of Japan first, finished third in Japanese F3, which is Super Formula,
which they rate him highly as well in Japan, and it's their tough series to go into against names that we don't necessarily recognise, but those guys are very, very good at what they do in Japan, and it's tougher. Van Dorn went over there, Gasly went over there, and we're trying to fight for a championship, but it's not easy for those guys. And so Palou, he's carved out a great career in America. Champion of IndyCar last year, rated really highly, and now suddenly getting a chance in an FP1 session, and what an opportunity for him.
Jenny?
Yeah, just a quick update on Giovinazzi, and the session is clearly over for him in the Haas. The clutch overheated, and it's likely a gearbox change is needed as well. So generally bad times at Haas.
Ouch. That's a shocker for Giovinazzi. And he has done in the past FP1s with them as well. Way back before he was racing with Alfa Romeo, he did some FP1s, and I remember him crashing the car in Hungary in an FP1 outing for Haas. This is the one thing that Günther Steiner doesn't want from a signing in the second seat alongside Magnussen.
And he was a little bit crashy in his F1 time as well. Do you remember Spa? That Spa crash at Pouhon, like on the last lap, and that felt like it was going to be the end of his career, but he managed to keep it going.
Yeah, he's got a ton of speed. He did quite well against Kimi Räikkönen. Question mark, how good was Kimi Räikkönen age 40? I think he's just butchered his chance of being in that car, and it looked like it was fairly 50-50, him or Hülkenberg. A bit of a toss-up for Günther Steiner. And now it's maybe, does that bring Schumacher back into the mix, or Hülkenberg? I just cannot see that Giovinazzi getting a chance in FP1 at this crucial stage in negotiations, crashing it on his second lap, and the car's not repairable in the next 50 minutes. I cannot see that they're going to sign him.
Palou finished third in that 2019 Super Formula Championship. Nick Cassidy took the win, with Naoki Yamamoto finishing second and Palou third. But Palou didn't score any points in the last race in Suzuka, and so he must have been right with Cassidy going into the final round of the championship. But must admit, didn't watch it. Don't watch enough Super Formula, I don't. Fernando Alonso has just had a bit of traffic coming around the hairpin at turn 1. Both Red Bulls he's had to go around the outside of. Verstappen's lap time is still the quickest on that 1:38.272. And Ocon is second fastest, and third fastest is Fernando Alonso, who was looking very Larry coming through the S's. Had a bit of a slide and a correction in the quickest part of the circuit. There was a brief yellow flag earlier on. Don't know who it was for, but someone out there had a moment. But I haven't seen a replay of that. Verstappen is improving on this lap on the soft tyres. Robert Schwartzman is coming down to the hairpin that takes him out onto the back straight. And Schwartzman's one who has always felt very nearly exciting. You know, he's always been there or thereabouts in the mix. One Formula 3 did Schwartzman in 2019, and then second in Formula 2 last year, but never feels like anyone's really ever bigging him up, despite quite a successful junior career.
I like Schwartzman. I think he's good. He's quite a fiery young driver as well. I think there was a feeling that he had to go and win Formula 2 last season, because he was very good as a rookie.
Fourth in his rookie season.
Yeah, having won Formula 3, and there was that hype, and he didn't then go and convert that to a dominant second season in Formula 2. Still good, second place, but it sort of knocked the wind from his sails a little bit. Again, great chance for him as we're riding on board with him, crossing the line in Ferrari, coming out of the final corner, goes 17th on soft tyres. I quite like the FP1 rule, that young drivers get a chance now a couple of times a year. It's nice, and the teams are clearly, the majority of them have saved up these chances for the end of the season when there's little to play for in the bigger picture, fewer upgrades coming on cars. So it's a good run out for some of these younger drivers.
Verstappen has jumped up his speed to 1 minute 37.4, 8 tenths quicker than Perez, who's now second. Vettel has jumped into third on a 1 minute 38.4, only a tenth slower than Perez, all on the soft tyre. Sainz fifth quickest in the Ferrari, 9 tenths of a second away, but I would suggest we haven't really seen a huge amount of representative running just yet. Isn't it? We'll see how bogged down in cost cap we get. If you do want a big old cost cap chat, download the Checker Flag podcast from BBC Sounds. But Bernard says, why weren't the penalties defined with the spending limit? Making up a penalty retrospectively is ridiculous. Andrew Benson, your thoughts?
So the facts are that the rules are the way they are because those were the rules that the teams were prepared to accept when the budget cap came in. It was a long, drawn-out process to get this cap introduced, and certain things were required by the teams. One of them was confidentiality, and that's the reason why the amount of the breach that Red Bull have done has not been made public, because the rules say it has to be confidential at this point. The process by which the penalty is applied, this idea of accepting, an agreement, it's not the FIA they make it clear to the team what penalty they want to give them, and the team can either accept that, which is an admission of guilt, which Red Bull at the moment haven't been prepared to do, because they're not publicly, but they're privately insistent that publicly insistent they haven't gone over the cap, but they're not saying much else than that publicly. And then after that, if the team doesn't accept the breach, then it goes to adjudication panel. It's all because this is the way the teams wanted it, and F1 and the FIA wanted the budget cap, so certain compromises needed to be introduced as a result.
Interesting. And we'll see if we get any more on the budget cap over the course of the weekend. Just had a thing come up on screen which I love. Théo Pourchaire has 2 pets, 2 golden retrievers, called Peaky and Shelby. So he is obviously a huge Peaky Blinders fan.
Yeah, exactly.
That's phenomenal. Have you watched Peaky Blinders, Andrew? Oh, he's just shaking his head. I love it when he's in this mood and just doesn't bother even picking up the microphone to answer.
I have nothing of merit to say about a show I've never watched.
Why haven't you watched Peaky Blinders?
I don't know. I know it's supposed to be really good.
Do you like television?
Yes.
You should give it a watch.
Yeah, but there's only so many hours in the day, and you have to pick and choose. Don't judge me, everyone.
What did you do on your flight over here?
I didn't watch Peaky Blinders. I did watch some movies.
You should have
had a sleep,
okay,
which served me well for Wednesday night, Jack, as you may remember. I was on reasonable form on Wednesday.
You were on great form. Went to bed early, but you're on great form.
Not as good form as last night, but...
No. Benson's in great form at the moment. Probably one of the people in best form in Formula One at the moment, Andrew Benson. 32 minutes and 3 seconds on the clock. Palou has just jumped up into 12th place. He's done a 39.9, and it's only 3 tenths slower than Lando Norris, and they're on the same tyres. So that feels pretty reasonable from Alex Palou at the moment. And as someone pointed out, nice to see PAL back on the timing tower.
I've never seen it, you see. When PAL's on the timing tower, I'm in the car. So this is a pleasure. It's a weird experience right now, seeing Palou in 12th place. That sounds about right as well.
Yeah. Where did you finish your last race here?
13th.
Okay.
13th. My only race here, 2016.
Do you know every result off the top of your head just like that?
I confess, I
mean, it's only a season and 2/3.
I thought it was 13th, felt right, but it was, I had to double check that one. It was a fairly bog standard race, that one.
As opposed to all your others.
Well, they were exceptional, yeah.
31 minutes and 5 seconds to go. Jenny Gow.
Just down at Mercedes. Listening to you guys is hilarious. Like, sometimes I forget that I'm part of this because it's just listening to you is so funny. Anyway, Mercedes have brought an update this weekend. It's their final really big upgrade, I suppose, of the season to try and tinker with this car and see what they can do ahead of next year and whatever philosophy they choose to try and get this car improved. So they've got rear wing, front wing, floor, all with tweaks to them. They're running them at different times on the different cars. So Russell will run some, Hamilton will run some, and they'll do some comparisons to try and work out if they're heading in the right direction or not. and they've got huge sensors and grills on Hamilton's car just behind the roll hoop area, which they're now just taking off. And he's being watched by his dad, who's at the back of the garage, and his stepmom. They're looking on, and it's nice to see them back in the garage. But yeah, the Mercedes working very, very hard at the moment to try and find the answers to the question that I think I'm asked most from people, and a lot of the fans here in America certainly are going, how did Mercedes got it so wrong? I think it's that'll be the question of this, one of the questions of this year.
29 minutes and 40 seconds to go, certainly will be, especially if they end up with no victory over the course of the season. Vettel goes up into second place in the Aston Martin. Felipe Drugovich is in the Aston Martin garage, the Formula 2 champion, watching the action unfold, and Vettel up into second. Whoever's in front of him on track just had a big old lock-up into turn one, and I think it's Mick Schumacher. So Mick Schumacher's just had a lock-up into the first corner, and something's just fallen off Carlos Sainz's car as he came bouncing through the S's, and just trying to work out where it's come from, really. But a little part of the Ferrari appeared to come adrift. But Verstappen is back in the pits, and he is still quickest on a 37.462, half a second quicker than Vettel, 8/10 quicker than Sainz in third, Perez fourth, Ocon fifth. Then it's the medium runners of Gasly, Alonso and Norris in 6th, 7th and 8th. 9th is Stroll on the softs, 10th is Yuki Tsunoda in the AlphaTauri on the hard tyre. Then it's Schumacher, Palou, Zhou, Schwartzman and Hamilton, the top 15. Albon, Russell, Giovinazzi, who's running his over after putting it in the barriers, Théo Pourchaire and Logan Sargent. Sargent currently 7.3 seconds off the pace of Max Verstappen, and he is currently 3 seconds slower than his teammate Alex Albon at the moment. But Sargent is interesting. He's another one with a decent junior career, who in the olden days, and he's just jumped up actually to 15th place, so he is now ahead of Alex Albon on the soft tyres. Albon was out on the hard tyres, but he's one of those, in the old days you would call it a good junior career, but these days it feels like you have to do the win everything on the way up for anyone to take you seriously. You know what I mean? In your first, the Russell, the Norris, the Leclercs, you have to win everything, otherwise you're rubbish, is sometimes how it feels these days.
It's become so competitive to get on the grid. I think harder than ever. I think we've got maybe the most competitive Formula One grid ever right now, of superstars that come through. As you mentioned, the run of talent that we've had come through in recent years, they have just won their way through F3, won through F2, and if they haven't won it, they've at least won races with so much panache that you can see that they would be a champion if they bothered to stay for a second season in it. And so that's the benchmark that the young drivers are sort of up against. And Sargent hasn't quite hit that benchmark, but he also looks like a decent driver. And to be honest, Zhou didn't hit that benchmark last year. Got his chance at Alfa Romeo, and he's been quite quietly impressive compared to Valtteri Bottas in the Alfa Romeo. So Carlos Sainz didn't have a particularly fantastic junior career. Won World Series, but that was sort of the highlight of an otherwise similar sort of junior career. And some drivers just get into Formula One and they can really make it work. Kamui Kobayashi was another famous example about 10 years ago now.
Stu G says, I might have misconstrued what's being said on hashtag BBC F1, but I think Brad Pitt's turned up to make a film called PK Blinders. Maybe. 26 minutes and 25 seconds to go. Russell through the first sector, 4/10 down on Verstappen's time, George Russell, as he is down in 18th at the moment, but this is his first lap on some soft tyres. He did 8 laps previously on some mediums. Let's go down to Jenny.
Just come up to Ferrari, just have a look at Carlos Sainz's car. We saw something fly off. It looks like it might have been a little winglet from around about the front right tyre. However, they're going over the car with a fine-tooth comb and having a look at all sorts of bits. There's one of the mechanics lying under the car at the moment. They've got some body work off. The front left, there's a little bit of work going on to the drum there as well. Taking this moment to just make sure everything else is okay as well.
Owen says, has someone got a sneezing fit in the commentary box? And yes, that is our producer who's being very noisy in the back. So sorry about him, everybody. Mick Schumacher jumps up into into 7th place with 25 minutes and 25 seconds to go. He's now saying abusive words in my ear, so thank you for that, producer, as well. Through the final corner comes George Russell. Where's this going to put him then on this soft tyre run? He goes up to 6th quickest, 1.1 seconds slower than Max Verstappen. Vettel currently 2nd, Sainz 3rd, Perez 4th, Stroll 5th. Russell, Ocon, Schumacher, Gasly and Alonso the top 10. Norris, Tsunoda, Palou, Joe and Schwartzman the top 15, and then Sargent, Hamilton, Pourchaire, Albon and Giovinazzi the 20 drivers. Again, Russell scraping along the ground as he comes through the S's. The cars are really leaning around as they come through there quite dramatically, especially when the cars are, you know, so much stiffer and stuff this year. They're really kind of leaning in those corners.
It looks bumpy as well, doesn't it, coming into those S's? The cars are generally much stiffer now. They're all running as low to the ground as possible for the ground effect, and it really, at the high speed, they are bouncing around a lot in the change of direction, which makes the life of the drivers very tricky. And Russell there was struggling on his latest lap, up to 7th place. The start of this session was really fragmented with the times. Mercedes were doing something very different, running what looked like more fuel in the car and a lower pace. Hamilton is still down in 17th place. He's just on an outlap now, so we'll see what he can do with Russell going 7th. The picture is a little clearer now. Schwartzman radio?
Yeah, start to have a bit of lockups in the front.
Copy, understood.
So that sounds like Schwartzman's on a longer run as well, on his soft tyres, 16th for him, and
11 laps on those softs.
Yeah, 2.2 seconds down on Carlos Sainz. So you can see the difference in run plan, and it's not a bad idea for the young drivers just to get some more laps on their belt, and then hopefully they'll get a run on some lower fuel in the last 23 minutes of the session. Mercedes now have got down to a pace, 1.1 seconds down on Verstappen. Alonso's just popped in in time to go 4/10 down on Verstappen.
Okay, I hit the curb though and the car bounced.
Okay, understood.
Ocon having a big oversteering moment at the sort of top of the hill at turn 9.
Tricky corner that. Really, just you start to lose the rear. It's been at the end of all the S's. You're really starting to overheat, especially with the bumps and the high speed. And then you got to just pop over that crest with a arc round to the left, balancing the throttle. And Ocon had a big snap and ran wide over track limits. Jumps up to 4th place in the end with his latest lap. Hamilton coming through there now and looks much neater on his soft tyre run. Verstappen just looks on it, doesn't he? The same. If
he look at the session, doesn't he? Every session he comes out and he's 2 seconds quicker than everybody else, and then eventually everyone kind of catches up. But just out the blocks, he's phenomenal.
He's got no chill, has he? No. Straight half a second clear. He's just been crowned champion. Everything's in the bag for him, and he's straight back to the top of the times. He's so good at finding the pace really quickly. I think that's probably, of all of his strengths, I think that's his best one, is just finding the grip. In wet conditions is obvious. He's a standout amongst maybe Lewis Hamilton and very few others, and he does it all the time even in dry conditions. Just those first laps out of the blocks, very strong. So he's 8/10 clear on Sainz and Perez, 1.1 seconds up on Russell at the moment. Hamilton just coming through the final few corners now, 19. The left-hand, he can carry a lot of speed through. You've got to be careful on track limits on the exit, but Lewis is good, up to the white line and not over. And we'll see where he jumps to. Can he get within a second of Verstappen? Wow.
The final sector was rapid for Hamilton. He was about 3/10 slower in sector 1, a couple of tenths slower in sector 2. So he was about half a second down after the middle sector, but then found a good 2 or 3 tenths in that final sector, Hamilton. Alonso has just done the fastest first sector of anyone.
Remember, it's a long lap here, Jack, and so it'll be a balance between, you know, where do you get the most out of the tyres? Don't take too much out of them in the first sector, or you're going to lose them in the last sector, and so on.
That final sector is tricky as well. Quadruple right-hander. He had a big twitch coming out of turn 1, or was he avoiding something on the road? He's coming out of turn 1. Oh no, he's just, I think he lit the rears.
That's funny. Russell had a similar moment to that. It was like a big snap, everyone, on the way into that corner on his lap. It looked awful, the Mercedes, when Russell turned into turn 1, and Hamilton's just had a very similar sort of bouncy, oversteery, juddery moment on the way out.
Must have been right on the edge of getting full throttle, because it was a long way after the corner, really, where you'd be expecting the drivers to be getting on full gas, especially on soft tyres. It was just a real twitch then from Hamilton, exited turn 1. Still managed to do a really strong lap time, which is good news for Mercedes. Alonso's on a flyer, comes through the final corner. Now whopper of a snap from him, and he goes 3rd. That was some car control.
That was lovely stuff. Alonso on the loud pedal out of the final corner, and a big slide. It almost looked like it was going to sort of tank slap her back the other way, but he kept it all together, Fernando Alonso, and jumps up into third place, a quarter of a second away from Max Verstappen. Stroll has just done a personal best in Sector 1, which is about 3/10 slower than Fernando Alonso has managed. 20 minutes and 9 seconds left on the clock.
That Alonso moment reminded me of something that he did in Singapore a few years ago. I think it might have been his last year at Ferrari, his final qualifying lap. He came out of the last corner of Singapore completely broadside like that, and nearly stacked it like he nearly did then. It was fantastic to watch. That was even more spectacular than this one was just now.
They never look quite as impressive on board, do they? You watch it from the outside and the car's so sideways, and on board it looks way tamer, and you'd expect Alonso to catch it. But it was a nice little moment from him. Looking quick so far in the Alpine. Jenny?
Yeah, the wind's really picked up, by the way. Very gusty out here, and even the little kind of ribbonette sheets that they've put over the sides of the grandstands are flicking around quite violently, and I would just wonder if that's causing some of these snaps. It's the highest point on the track as they come over the top of turn 1, and yeah, it's remarkable quite how gusty it can be at times. And just on Verstappen, leading at the moment on the timesheets, do you think... He's not though, is he? He's just been pipped. But anyway, do you think he can win all of the 4 races remaining?
Yeah. 18 minutes to go.
The only race he's lost since Leclerc won in Austria was in Singapore when Red Bull messed up qualifying and he started 8th or whatever it was. That's the only time he's lost a race.
And he would have won Singapore with his eyes closed.
Easy, yeah.
He was leading at Silverstone, but then picked up the damage. And then you're back to Monaco, he didn't win, Australia and Bahrain, and that's it.
And he's been winning them from the front or the back.
Yeah.
That's the extent of this run of dominance. He could start 14th and still lead after 5 or 10 laps. It's been quite an incredible run from Verstappen. What it's going to take is a faultless weekend from either Ferrari or Mercedes, and a lesser strong weekend from Red Bull, and he might get toppled.
Why were Ferrari so competitive in Austria? I can't quite. I think that's the thing. I can't. And also, I guess maybe Paul Ricard as well. But where did that? Because they beat Red Bull hands down in Austria.
So I think there was 2 things going on there. First of all, that was if you remember the first half of the season, the cars on performance were neck and neck.
Yeah.
The only reason they didn't go into the summer break neck and neck on points was because Ferrari just kept messing it up, engine failures,
and maybe Red Bull
errors.
had a race pace advantage.
It depends on the race. Jolie and I had a bit of a WhatsApp conversation about this a few weeks ago, but it's shifted now. I was arguing that the Red Bull was slightly ahead on race pace in the first half of the season. Jolie was arguing it was slightly Ferrari on race pace. I still think he's wrong.
Yeah. I think you could. My point was you could tilt it either way.
Yes.
There's
yeah,
race
so
pace and there's tyre management.
That's
as well.
point 1, and point 2 is Red Bull got their setup wrong in Austria, basically.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Austria was the outlier for them. Everything else they've been strong, and Ferrari have struggled more and more as the season's gone on, or Red Bull have progressed. Verstappen's been better, the cars got lighter, and Ferrari haven't been able to match that level of progress. More accurately, the picture.
Carlos Sainz is on a lap at the moment. He's just coming through the middle sector, did the fastest first sector of anyone. His middle sector is a couple of tenths slower than what Lance Stroll has managed, because as Jenny said, Lance Stroll has gone to the top of the times on a 37.4, 2/1000ths quicker than Verstappen, and still ahead of Sergio Perez. This is another Friday where Aston Martin are threatening to look strong. Just going to watch Sainz through the last couple of corners now, through the quadruple right-hander, quadruple apex right-hander, then flicks it left into turn 19, out towards the final corner now at turn 20, onto the brakes, through the left, onto the power, and Sainz goes quickest at 1 minute 36.857, 6/10ths quicker than Lance Stroll. 16 minutes to go. Jenny Gow.
Yeah, just thinking back to Ferrari, I think some people have been able to draw a conclusion about the technical directive that came in over the summer break, and then putting 2 and 2 together to maybe come out with 4.5, in that at that point Ferrari's pace advantage seemed to fall away. But I think everybody, certainly involved with Ferrari, have said, no, that's not the case. The technical directive, all about the floor, didn't hurt us. But you can understand why it's easy for people to look at that and think that might be one of the contributing factors.
It's a little bit like Ferrari saying when they clarified the engine rules in Austin in 2019 and they suddenly stopped getting poles, and they said that didn't hurt them either, and no one really believed them.
And they were suddenly then slowest in Monza and Spa.
Yeah, so I think, Jenny, you're right. Everybody believes that the floor technical directive, which basically what Ferrari were doing, everyone believes, is they had a plank that flexed upwards into a sort of pocket at the bottom of the monocoque, which allowed them to control the ride height a bit more, and that was good at helping keeping porpoising under control and keeping a stable aerodynamic platform. They lost that with that technical directive. That made it clear that was not allowed anymore, and they definitely have dropped off in performance since then.
They've still been quick though, haven't they? Saturdays there is always Leclerc, maybe Sainz and Verstappen.
Where it's affected them is in the races. The tyre wear has just fallen off a cliff for them, which is a problem they've had in the past, and even occasionally at the start of this year, but they generally got a measure of it through the first part of this year when Leclerc was going wheel to wheel with Verstappen, toe to toe with Verstappen, whichever metaphor you want to choose. But they've definitely lost that tyre degradation position that they had earlier in the year, and they've fallen backwards on that.
What two body parts did you say?
I can't remember.
Wheel to wheel or toe to toe.
Okay, because you could also do like face to face, head to head,
shoulder to shoulder.
Yeah,
that's teammates though, isn't it? Really?
Can you do every? Yeah, can you do every body part?
Careful.
I nearly
locked horns.
Locked horns, yeah. Eye to eye. Is that one? No, that you don't see eye to eye. Nose to nose. 13 minutes and 35 seconds on the clock. Sainz quickest. Hamilton jumps up into second place, 4/10 slower than Carlos Sainz as he comes past our commentary box and over the line. In fact, I've just realised, yeah, the commentary box here is we're just on the inside of the final corner. We probably could have seen the Alonso slide in real life, but we end up watching the TV rather than out the window sometimes, which is a bit of a shame, but the nature of the beast. Here's a random one from Simon Baker. Which driver could save a car the best once the back end stepped out? Simon says his favourite was Nigel Mansell, always having big slides. I think it's a thing of the era though as well, isn't it? Because you look at some of the lean and the sliding that used to go on in sort of the 50s and the 60s, because the cars were so different on their road tyres and stuff like that. Tom Price famously always used to drift everywhere, and he was really quick, but then someone said to him, that's not the quickest way to go. Like, try and be straight. And he was like, okay. And then he was amazing, apparently. I can't remember where I read that. I think I read that in Tremaine's book, The Lost Generation. Anyway.
The age before data, that is.
Yeah, exactly.
If you had data, you'd find that out straight away, which is what every young driver grows up with. As soon as they get into even go-karts now, you realise that you don't want to be sliding it, you're just scrubbing your speed. You want to be going. That's why when you look at pole laps now, we all want to see big, leery pole laps. The Leclerc Singapore lap from 2019 was an iconic lap because he was actually really sideways throughout it, and it was impressive car control for a fast lap. But generally, they're silky smooth, aren't they? And that's because it's the quickest way.
11 minutes and 48 seconds on the clock. Sainz still quickest at the moment. Lando Norris is 15th fastest at the moment in the McLaren, but he's just done a personal best first sector, 3/10 down on Sainz, and then he's half a second down, so he's 8/10 down after the first two sectors here, Lando Norris. He's coming now into the final two corners on the circuit. He's out on the soft tyre. This is his first run on the softs. Throws it left into turn 19 and then slower into turn 20, out across the line. I watched him with my eyes, and he goes up into 9th place, a 1 minute 37.856, a second away from Carlos Sainz. Very, very interesting times at McLaren, I think, for next season. I'm so interested to see where they end up in the competitive order, because there's no doubt that this year has been disappointing compared to where they were last season. So can they find that time back? Also, I was just thinking earlier on, what Schwartzman has, that feels like a sensible thing if you're Haas, but I haven't heard that one ruminate it, but that sort of Ferrari Young Driver Academy, Ferrari Reserve. He's done his, time in the junior formula. Give him a go rather than Hülkenberg.
He was rumoured there a year or two ago.
Yeah.
There was rumours of Schwartzman being in the lineup, but Günther Steiner doesn't want to put a rookie in the car. After doing the Mazepin and now Schumacher approach, he famously didn't want to put a rookie in the car when Haas turned up, and they had Grosjean and Gutierrez, and then Grosjean and Magnussen, and there was good rookies out there, but he just said no, experience is the way. Then they went for rookies, and they were terrible.
But that's because he went for terrible rookies.
Well, he went for the Formula 2 champion.
Well, okay, point taken. But alongside two rookies is a tough one.
But I don't think Schwartzman is a standout driver enough to put him in, and I don't think he'd be an upgrade on Schumacher.
Really?
So if you want your performance, I'd like to see him have a shot, or at least another crack at Formula 2, or just really show what he can do. And maybe he could be, but I think if you're just looking at it without from what we have in front of us now, Schwartzman's Formula 2 seasons against Schumacher's, there's at least there's not much to separate them, or at best there's not much to separate them.
Yeah, that's a fair point. Jenny?
Yes, just on that, there's a very noisy Lando Norris. Comes in, does a practice pit stop. They take him from the soft tyres onto the medium, and then he heads out again in his McLaren. Just on that point, Nick de Vries, has he kind of changed the game for drivers coming in to do FP1s? Because before you'd think, okay, I'm doing FP1, I'll help the team out. They might give me a nice fast lap towards the end of the run plan. I've got to bring the car home, job done. But de Vries has now had opportunities because he was good in the car. And do you think that these drivers who are getting an opportunity this weekend are thinking, okay, well, if I'm, say you're Pourchaire or Schwartzman, if you can go out there and really impress people with the way you work, not just your time, but everything about your demeanour, the way you work with your engineers, mechanics, there's a shot now, no?
I think the thing that happened with de Vries was he just got the situation that every reserve driver kind of dreams of. Basically, that's the difference. The FP1 running for de Vries was kind of relatively irrelevant. It helped because he was up to speed with the tracker a little bit, but that could have happened to anybody if your actual driver gets a bit poorly. Like when you were reserve in 15 with Lotus, if Maldonado gets a bit sick and you come in and you do a great job, then you're kind of booking yourself a place for next season potentially. So that's it. All that happened to de Vries was the thing that all the reserve drivers dream of happened. And I don't think the Friday FP1 running is kind of relevant to that.
His FP1 running was actually completely unremarkable on that Monza weekend. He did it for Aston Martin, and it was a run-of-the-mill go. It was not...
I think he had a lot of aero reiki stuff.
Yeah, it was a very unexceptional. He'd already done a run for Williams, and the team liked him. And every time you get in the car, as a rookie or a Friday driver or reserve, it's a chance to impress. So whether it's an FP1 or a race weekend, it's a chance to impress. But in an FP1, you sometimes are a little bit stuck with just sitting on a run plan. Schwartzman may well be on that right now in 16th place on a soft tyre. He's just improved, but still 2 seconds away from his teammate at the top.
He's just put a new soft tyre on, actually, Schwartzman. So that was his first run, presumably at a lowish fuel, maybe.
2 seconds is a biggie, quite a gap. But every time you get a chance is an opportunity. But when you're in for the race weekend, everyone can see it. You know that on qualifying, everyone's on low fuel. You get an absolute clear idea of the pecking order, and that's what de Vries did so well. Jenny?
Yeah, just on that, I think de Vries had already been linked with Williams, hadn't he, by that? Like before Monza, he'd done a couple of free practices, and I think everybody was quite impressed by him already, and they started making moves towards looking at Williams as his option for a race seat next year. And okay, it's turned into probably a much better seat, but yeah, I find it interesting that that's now more of a possibility.
Yeah, he was in the market for a Williams driver. Latifi was still there at the time, and it was maybe Sargent or Latifi, but de Vries was there lurking. And then he did so well in Monza that everyone actually wanted a piece of Nick de Vries for next year, and Alpine was sniffing around. Red Bull with AlphaTauri were there, which is where he's going to end up.
He did a decent job, actually. Was it Paul Ricard that he did the Mercedes FP1, and that was solid?
Yep. And he's an established driver, isn't he? He's a Formula 2 champion, a Formula E champion.
Did he win Le Mans this year? Did he win Le Mans?
Did he?
Did he win his class at Le Mans?
Did he?
I can't remember. Maybe not.
But I think he's 27. Yeah. So he's not a young driver. He's actually older than a fair few on the grid, including Max Verstappen.
Yeah, so older than Verstappen, that's true.
He'll be the oldest Dutchman on the grid next year when he's alongside Max. So I think that experience really showed as well and helped him to grasp the opportunity.
So 5 minutes to go. Sainz is quickest, Verstappen is second. So Verstappen fired it up on a brand new set of softs and wasn't able to beat Sainz's time on that last lap. So that's the first real kind of back-to-back representative running we've seen. Sainz doing the quickest lap of anyone, a 36.8, a couple of tenths quicker than Max Verstappen. So that appears to be a decent run for Carlos Sainz and the Ferrari team. Verstappen's on a cool-down lap now, so he'll then go again. But Hamilton is now out on the medium tyre. Stroll in fourth has gone out on the hard tyre. Perez fifth, Alonso sixth, Russell, Gasly, Norris, Vettel at the top 10 at the moment. Then it's Ocon, Zhou, Albon, Tsunoda, Schumacher, the top 15. Schwartzman, Palou, Pourchaire, Sargent and Giovinazzi, the 20 drivers. So the 5 rookies down in the bottom 5 places at the moment with 4 minutes to go. And in the early stages, Palou looked like he was doing a sort of... He's still on those same medium tyres. He's just run the one set of medium tyres all session. Look at Palou, that's got to be a bit annoying, isn't it? You can't give me a soft and a low fuel run, please.
Yeah, and I'm sure he'll have been pushing for it as well. Come on, guys, let me have a good go. But it doesn't look like it's happened for him. 3.5 minutes to go, so it won't happen for him. Out on track on the mediums. Shall I tell you who has done a good job this year? In the end, I think Aston Martin. So quietly, they can get themselves to finish 6th in this championship, which for a team that was a borderline laughingstock in Melbourne when they kept crashing and had no pace, this would be quite an achievement to have brought so much performance to the car. The drivers are getting more out of it. With the pace they've got right now as well, Stroll 4th, Vettel 10th. He's just had a big moment in the S's. They've got some pace now, and Alfa Romeo, who have been sitting pretty in 6th for so much of this season, have suddenly found themselves not scoring points at all.
Their line graphs are like completely opposite, aren't they?
They could get done.
And actually, when Alonso signed for Aston Martin just after Hungary, everyone was like, what on earth is he doing? Although everyone realised why he did it. But now you often see the Alpines and the Aston Martins racing together, and so it might not be a backward step for him at all.
Yeah, and they're a well-financed team. They're a team with huge aspirations, and there was a lot of criticism early on in the season when you have a whole new set of regulations. It was a chance for all of these well-backed midfielders with their cost cap era to try and jump up and fight for wins or podiums, which is what we were all expecting or hoping at least. And none of them did it. But Aston Martin particularly were the ones that not only didn't go forwards, but they went right to the back of the field. So you've got to give credit where it's due to make enough performance gains through the year that you can march from the tail end Charlies that they were at the start of the season to being regularly fighting for points and getting 6 out of 10 constructors. That's a great effort.
Sorry, go on. Where they're struggling is qualifying pace still.
I was about to say they still miss out on... They still get knocked out in Q1 a lot.
But in the races, they're strong. Yeah.
But I think a lot of that's the drivers not getting the most in qualifying. When you look at them, they're making mistakes. They're doing good first runs, but then one of them will make a big mistake on the second run, or they won't be on the right tyres in the wet conditions. Or I think there's a lot of it. Vettel nearly went out in Q1 in Japan last time out. And then he managed to just get a lap in because actually Stroll went out in Q1 because he made a mistake. And then Vettel goes all the way to Q3. So that's the performance of the car, but yet he was almost out in Q1.
Oh, Schwartzman's just been majorly bulked by Verstappen. He was on a reasonable lap, Schwartzman. Half a second down on Sainz in Sector 1 and 8 tenths down in Sector 2, so not actually a reasonable lap. But he was going to be improving, but he got really badly bulked by Verstappen in the final corner. Those of you probably knew this already. De Vries didn't win Le Mans. I don't know why I thought he did. Roberto Gonzalez, Antonio Felix da Costa and Will Stevens won the LMP2 class. De Vries finished 4th. So, again, not quite sure why I thought he might have won it, but he didn't. 44 seconds left on the clock. And Schwartzman has a bit of a lock-up coming into the hairpin and then out onto the back straight. Didn't manage to improve on that lap. So Schwartzman, difficult to read. Again, it's unknown with the fuel load. So Palou, having done the whole session, all 20 laps on one set of medium tyres, not really representative reading there. Not much to read in with Théo Pourchaire either, because he also has done the whole session on one set of medium tyres. So none of them getting a good crack at it, really. Logan Sargent did 7 laps on the softs initially, but then did 13 laps on the hard tyre, which is not dissimilar to Alex Albon. Checker flag is out, but it's a toughie for those rookies because it doesn't feel like they've been given a sort of like-for-like scenario. The only one that might have is Robert Schwartzman, and he hasn't really nailed it, to be honest. Through the final corner he comes, doesn't improve this time around either. So yeah, I was quite excited to see all them at the start and see what they could do compared to their more experienced teammates, but we don't get it.
There were 2 of them that had a chance that it really counts for. Giovinazzi,
well, yeah,
who we haven't been talking about for the last 55 minutes because he crashed on his second flying lap, and Logan Sargent. Sargent at the bottom of the times, similar run plan to the other Williams of Albon today.
Yeah, I have a Red Bull who blocked me.
Copy.
That was the Schwartzman-Verstappen incident from a little earlier on.
The problem for Sargent, though, is they're running the soft first and then going to the hard. It's when you're a rookie and you're getting your first chance to try and get the most out of a soft tyre initially is a tough one.
So, checker flag out. Carlos Sainz ends the session quickest, 2 tenths quicker than Max Verstappen on pretty like-for-like tyres. Hamilton third, only 4 tenths back from Sainz. Fourth for Stroll in an impressive lap time. Perez in 5th, Alonso 6th, Russell, Gasly, Norris and Vettel the rest of the top 10. Ocon, Joe, Albon, Tsunoda and Schumacher the top 15. Schwartzman, Palou, Pourchaire, Sargent and Giovinazzi the 20 drivers.
So that's it. Free practice 1 is done and dusted. We've had an hour of running. There'll be an hour and a half later on for free practice 2 as we get a Pirelli tyre test. So plenty of time for the drivers to go out and the 5 drivers who sat out that session. Verstappen radio.
There must be something wrong with the car because I have no front end in low speed.
Okay, understood, Max.
No front end in low speed is Verstappen's complaint.
Yeah, saying there was something wrong with the car. Yes, so those 5 drivers that had to sit out free practice 1 will get their mileage in free practice 2 when they finally get to do this much awaited Pirelli tyre test that they were meant to do in Japan. Obviously couldn't because it rained all session, so they'll finally get their chance to do it here. And also next weekend in Mexico, which is a bit disappointing for Pato O'Ward, who was hoping to go out in Mexico in front of his home fans and do a test in free practice 1, and because they've moved that Pirelli tyre test he can't do it, and now he'll do it in Abu Dhabi for McLaren, sitting in for Lando Norris in free practice 1, but he was ever hopeful. Can you imagine how good that would have been?
It would have been very cool.
Yeah, really would have been cool. There we go. So it is the Ferrari that's fastest in that session. Can we read much into that, Jack?
Yeah, I think it's quite encouraging for Ferrari, to be honest, that Sainz is a couple of tenths up the road from Verstappen. A long way to go, of course, and it's only free practice 1, but we'll see what happens in the second practice session later on today, because the run plan's going to be, majorly affected by the Pirelli tyre test and things like that, and Verstappen's complaining something wrong with the car, no grip in the slow speed stuff, so they'll hope that they can get that sorted. And actually, was it Sainz's final sector that was quick, or someone did a quick final sector at one point, and that is kind of where the slow stuff is. Maybe the kind of really that's kind of double left that folds back on itself, the final corner, that's kind of where the slow stuff is.
Lewis Hamilton also out there doing pretty good stuff, really, and they've got this next and latest upgrade to the car, Pourchaire.
Yeah, that was also incredible, guys. Thank you very much. Super experience. I'm a bit far off, but yeah.
Okay, copy, Teo. And yeah, good work. Really good job for your first session.
Teo had a lovely time.
And why wouldn't you? Come on, let's face facts. If any of us got the opportunity.
Did you say that China, what, 15? Was it? Did you come on the radio afterwards going, oh, thanks, guys, I had a great time out there?
I was busy telling them the balance of the car, what I think we needed to work on. Yeah, sure.
Always giving the feedback. Right, come back and join us later on as free practice 2 gets underway here at Circuit of the Americas, and let's see who's got what when it comes to the second session. My thanks to Jack, Jolyon and Andrew, and of course if there's any breaking news from the FIA or whoever it may be, you can go onto the BBC Sport website and read Andrew Benson's article about it. Carlos Sainz, fastest in free practice 1, followed by Max Verstappen, Lewis Hamilton. This has been an IMG production for BBC Radio 5 Live.